All right, good Friday afternoon. Meteorologist Jordan Evans here, along with meteorologist Mark Pena. We're going to talk about Debby and the tropical uh, everything it brought: hurricane, slow-moving, tropical storm, post-tropical through the mid-Atlantic, and unfortunately, it was deadly with several deaths reported with the storm. But it wasn't a high-end hurricane either, so it doesn't take much, to cause a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely right. This is a textbook example of, even a tropical storm, excuse me, can cause a lot of problems. And you basically get a little bit of everything as it decays and moves through, parts of our country. So we got lots of details on what to expect, and we'll go ahead and get through it.
Yeah, so post-tropical cyclone, that's what it is as of Friday, late morning, early afternoon. But again, it started as that first landfall, Category 1 hurricane in the Big Bend of Florida, went back out to sea, almost sat there. I mean, Mark, it
Yeah.
was moving at like 3 miles an hour at one point.
Yeah, dropping just torrential amounts of rain in the South Carolina, Georgia coastline area. Rainfall amounts of 10 plus inches in that area. And yeah, as you mentioned, Jordan, it just kind of sat there. It was stuck between, it couldn't get caught up by the jet stream. It just kind of sat there. And unfortunately, this happens. Think of Harvey. That same thing happened to the Houston area where it just sat there as a non hurricane and just flooded the area. So
Yeah.
thankfully, we got some movement now. Unfortunately, that moved right towards our area, bringing torrential downpours here. But at least it was moving, which is the good part.
Right. You can almost see that icon there as it went from tropical storm to post-tropical. You can see the speed of that little icon just gets faster and faster. So
Right.
big indication that, yeah, it gets picked up. And now there's some fronts attached to it. So it's going to bring in some nice conditions for our weekend, as you mentioned. So here in the DMV, again, I mean, damage. We had not just the wind damage, the isolated tornado damage south of us, but really flooding was the big issue here in the district.
Yeah, and the thing with these decaying tropical cyclones is that the strong winds associated with the eye they don't necessarily just disappear as it goes over land. It weakens, but depending on where that center of circulation passes through, you'll get some of those tropical like wind gusts. So that's where we got some of those down trees. But as you mentioned too, the tornadoes that form because of these as well. Um, there we go, right
Yeah.
there down in Stafford County. I
Yeah,
think
so
you
this
were
was
here.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, one area in particular, I believe they're going to send out a site survey team, the National Weather Service office, and they'll indicate was this tornado. This happened at night, 8 o'clock. So really, this was indicated by a tornado debris signature on the radar. It's called the correlation coefficient, and there was a debris ball that sometimes we refer to it as well because they look like a little circle. That was showing up on radar as the storm moved through. There's other survey teams going out toward western Loudoun County into Clark County. There's potentially one, Mark, that jumped right over the Blue Ridge. If it was truly
Mm.
on the ground, then this would, get rid of some people that can say, oh, tornadoes never cross mountain ranges. Well, this
Yeah.
would verify that.
That will definitely be something that we're both looking out for because yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely a little tale, I guess you could say, in
Yeah.
the meteorology community.
But the good news is these aren't the classic tornadoes that you and I have, been around out in the
Right.
plains as we have both worked in Texas and Oklahoma.
Mhm.
But still, I mean, these happen little to no warning. So this is
Right.
the velocity recap from Friday morning across the DC area. So at 6 o'clock, meteorologist Brian Vandegraff and I were on the air tracking these little circulations. They were enough to uh, issue for tornado warnings to be issued by the National Weather Service. So that one in particular is this loop. As you can see it cross from Charles County into southern Fairfax County, crossed right over Mount Vernon, very close to the George Washington property there in southern Mount Vernon. Eventually, it started to weaken. It fell apart. The rotation did. And the good news with this one in particular is nothing at least touched down that we
Yeah.
saw or the National Weather Service saw.
Yeah, and that's important to think back. The tornado watch that was issued for last night. It's for instances like that. These quick spin up tornadoes can happen so fast that it's difficult to get a pinpoint of where to put the warnings. You just kind of have to be unaware across the entire area. As
Yeah.
you mentioned too, yeah, clear indication right there. I'm seeing it. on velocity right there, moving right through Fairfax County. Thankfully, again, damage pretty minimum from what we know right now, which is always good news. But again, another just sign of, yeah, tropical systems can bring a little bit of everything, and we always just need to
Mhm.
make sure that we're on guard and that we're prepared for all these different kind of hazards.
So, Mark, talk about this because this is obviously classic. One of the tools we look at for forecasting tornadoes
Hmm.
with more of your classic setups, your cold fronts that come through, your comma-shaped low. There's a lot of vorticity with that one.
Right,
But as you mentioned, these tropical systems, the spin still goes on land. It
right.
eventually weakens, but it was enough do to cause those circulations here. So talk about this low-level jet and like all the wind arrows we're
Right,
seeing.
yeah. So lots on the map here, but what we take away from this though is that those white arrows are surface winds and the kind of orangish yellow arrows are the upper level winds. And whenever they're kind of crisscrossing, or even if they're just kind of just intersecting at a certain point, that's divergence a lot. That can create spin, which leads to these quick spin up tornadoes. And notice it's over a broad area. That's a thing to take away with this, is that it's not it's, uh, it's not particular to any zone. It's over a wide area, so that's why that tornado watch was issued for most of the DMV last night. But yeah, it's these diverging winds which can again cause some quick spin up tornadoes, and that's what we were on the lookout last night. Um, but yeah, as you mentioned, Jordan, pretty classic setup in our eyes, at least, of uh, what can cause some tornadoes
Yeah.
across our area.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of hurricanes and tropical systems, it's always, I mean, the categories are based on the wind speed.
Hmm.
And so I think generally the public can just think of a hurricane as like, oh, it's a category 5. That's where you're going to have your maximum winds over 155 or so miles per hour. But I've also heard meteorologists refer to storms as category slow. And I mean, Harvey was a perfect example. And then Debby here in South Carolina was another example. I mean, you don't have to have a strong hurricane. Harvey
Right.
was a strong hurricane, but it was also a slow mover. Debby
Hmm.
was not a strong hurricane or tropical storm, but it was a slow mover. And again,
Yeah.
I think it's the rain that, the rain, the flooding, the storm surge. But then, of course, I think one of the last thing people think about with hurricanes is, yeah, there's tornadoes that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So anyway, low level jet. The good news is it's moving out of here. So
Hmm.
looking forward, as we have a couple of minutes left here, Mark. So drought monitor. It did come out yesterday. Nothing changed. I was a little surprised because we've had some good rain in parts of the higher terrain within the last
That's
7 days.
I think
But
that goes to show though how severe the drought is. That
yeah,
even with some scattered showers over the past few days, it didn't do much. But what I've been saying though is like we either needed a active weather pattern to bring us rain almost every other day, or a decaying tropical system, and that's exactly what we got. And thankfully, as you'll show us, Jordan, this rain fell mostly exactly where we needed it.
yeah.
Yep.
So the 24-hour totals. Again, the sensors are placed in the different communities and the towns out here. So, but really, where you see those pinks and purples, that's a lot of rain. And explain where that comes from when it comes to like the mountains kind of helping to produce that.
Yep. So it's called orographic lift, and what that does is the mountain peaks act as a way to kind of wring out moisture from systems. So you notice where those purple colors are right there on the Blue Ridge. That's where some of the highest peaks are, and so that's they did exactly what we expect them to do. They wrung out all that moisture right over the ridge tops, and what this is going to lead to, too, Jordan, is that all that rain is going to take a while to filter down to the creeks and streams. So that's something that we'll be monitoring in the 4 o'clock hour here on WJLA. That we could see some high waters in our creeks, streams, and rivers through the weekend as all this water filters down into our tributaries.
Yeah, so the runoff continues,
Hmm.
but the river levels, they've been so low. A lot of the
Hmm.
tubing float trips out there toward Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, some of those have been put on hold. So I mean, this will
Hmm.
quickly add to that, but of course, too much water in a short amount of
Right.
time can to lead to those issues. So let's wrap up here real quick. It's only August.
Yeah.
We still have about a month to go just to reach peak. And then we have to get past peak, which technically the season goes through November, but usually October we start to really improve things. But again, NOAA, Colorado State, both forecasting a lot of storms, and we're just now on letter D, Debbie for the alphabet. So next will be Ernesto for the next named
Ernesto.
storm.
Yep. Yep, and we will be monitoring it because again, the storm tracks for these, especially in the peak of tropical season, brings a lot of these up the East Coast. And here we go right now. This next investment that we'll be monitoring has its eyes on the Caribbean. From there, still way too early to know where it's going to go, but we will of course be watching it.
Right. Yes, we will. Mark, it was good to chat. We made it through mostly.
Yeah.
Again, there was some flooding, some tornado damage. So we'll be out there analyzing it all. But again, a long way to go for the tropics. But good to chat with you and get your take on sort of what happened here across the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you.